Wow, 200 subscribers. Hard to believe I've made it this far. I feel like this calls for a special review. And what better choice for said review than a figure I've been meaning to rip into for a while. Looking good is important, or at least that's what my mom says in between asking me why I'm still single. But seriously, looks are important, not just for your own personal health or general life things, but also in the context of action figures. No one wants a figure whose sculpting is poor, you want it to look its best. But just like in general life, good looks aren't everything. And this guy right here is a pretty good example of how you need more than just a pretty face. The Imagination Works Son Goku. I've been meaning to talk about this guy for a while. To give some context, I didn't start collecting until 2020. It was one of those things I picked up during the pandemic and it just sort of stuck. And this guy was one of those initial purchases I made. And to say I was disappointed would be underselling it a bit. And seeing as how I've now passed the 200 subscriber mark, I figured this would be a great time to finally talk about how bad this figure is. But what is it about this guy that angered me? He certainly doesn't look bad at a first glance. Well, as I said, good looks aren't everything, so let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Okay, so I think we need to give a little bit of history here. Imagination Works wasn't around for very long and didn't have many releases, so allow me a chance to get you all up to speed. Imagination Works was Bandai's attempt to make a Hot Toys styled premium line, with extra attention to the sculpt and textures, near seamless joints, vibrant colors, a plethora of accessories, and top tier articulation. It started off with Goku here, then came Vegeta, then Luffy, and that was it. They never released another figure. A line only 3 figures deep, eh? This is reminding me of Transformers' short-lived hybrid style line. I couldn't tell you exactly why this line fell through, but my gut tells me it has something to do with the reception of its first release. Goku had a pretty mixed reception when he first dropped. He wasn't outright hated, but I think I can say that the response was certainly tepid. He spent a long time on sale at online retailers. In fact, he's still available at a discount on Big Bad Toy Store. People really didn't care for this guy. You certainly wouldn't get that just from looking at him though. As far as the vanilla pose is concerned, Goku looks pretty damn stellar. It kinda reminds me of the Jump Force design, but in a good way, with no uncanny valley. It's still clearly Goku, just with some extra attention to detail and additional airbrushing. Specifically, the detail on his gi is fantastic. I know there are quite a few criticisms over the decision not to use soft goods, but I actually think that wasn't a bad idea. The way Goku's gi sits on him could have easily resulted in them looking way too baggy if they use soft goods. Using plastic lets them sit the way it should and allows them to add these extra details, not to mention the airbrushing they've used to help it pop a bit more. Of course, the praise is kind of undercut though by the contrast between the top and bottom halves. While the top of Goku is pretty seamless overall, the bottom is cut up just about as much as an SH Figuarts. It doesn't attract enough for me to be that bothered by it, but I do have to question why they tried to hide the joints as much as they could on the top half, only to then not bother with the legs. At that point, you might as well have just used soft goods. Speaking of seamless though, let's talk about these stupid arms. So in order to make the arms as seamless as possible, Bandai has used silicone plastic for them, so that the joint is completely hidden inside. Now in terms of functionality, this works fine enough. You still get the bicep swivel, and the elbow joint gets about as much range as you'd expect it to. But there are 2 big problems with this design. For one, the rubbery silicone easily picks up dust, and it can be quite annoying to get it off. The other problem though can be summed up in 3 simple words. Wear and tear! There's a reason companies like Mezco and Hot Toys use soft goods, and don't typically use silicone if they can get away with it. If one isn't careful, plastics like this can easily tear apart over time. And lo and behold, about a year after he released, people have shown that Goku's arms begin to do exactly that. Build quality is super important. You want the stuff you buy to last a long time. And the fact that this can happen means that in order to keep it in its best condition, I essentially can't articulate the elbows, gimping the overall articulation. That isn't acceptable. It flat out isn't. And believe me, this isn't the only case of the figure having build issues, but more on that later. For now, let's talk about something that's done pretty well. It's still got problems, but nothing egregious. We get a nice amount of accessories, pretty much all of the hands you'd expect Goku to come with, but the big boon here is the head sculpts. Looks really nice, and of course you have different faceplates to choose from, but you don't just get different faceplates, you also get eyepieces so that he can look in different directions. What a cool feature to have. The articulation is going to be a big issue for this guy, but at least in this instance you get something that helps give you more options for posing. But that's not all, as you also get a Super Saiyan head with all the same options as the default. Be a bit careful when switching the heads, the spikes on the hair are pretty sharp. Like, no joke, I actually cut myself switching the heads out while messing with this guy. Be careful. And this Super Saiyan head is also excellent. I'm loving the shading and the white at the tips of his hair. I really wish Bandai was willing to do something like this in the SH Figuarts line. I know it's more cost effective to just make a separate release, but man, it would be a nice option to have. I do have one small criticism though, and that's the lack of a smiling face for either the base or Super Saiyan heads. Not a deal breaker, but given Goku's character and the price of the figure, I think it would have been better to include it for at least the base head sculpt. Finally, you get a display piece. Works well enough. Honestly, I don't really have a whole lot to say here. It's fine. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that quick reprieve because we're back in the bad again with the articulation. Or maybe I should say the lack thereof, because this guy can't pose for shit. Remember how I said this guy looks good in a vanilla pose? Yeah, that's because moving the legs at all results in this. What is this gap? Why is there no cover piece to hide this? You're getting outdone by the SH Figuarts version. Hell, I'll do you one better. You're getting outdone by the Dragon Stars version. Come on, man. And don't even bother moving the legs backwards. Ah, yes, finally. I can see what Goku would look like if his ass was where his crotch is supposed to be. Okay, sure. This doesn't exactly look great. But hey, at least it's functional. You get a pretty good amount of range from it. So let's see how much range he gets in the splits. That's it. That's all he gets. Remember how one of the big selling points for this figure was the articulation scheme? Just, lol. Lamau even. What makes this worse is that this pathetic range and gapping problem isn't the only issues the hips have. Remember how the silicone on the arms will degrade over time? Well, the hips one-up them by being super brittle straight away and breaking easily if you apply too much pressure. Trust me, I know this because guess what? This is my second copy of Goku. The first one's hip broke the same day I took it out of the box. And look, I'm more than willing to chalk some of that up to my own negligence, but considering other reviewers have had the same thing happen to them, I can't ignore that this is a clear quality control issue, if not an outright design flaw. I mean, the other joints work well enough, barring the chest anyway. Oh yeah, I love it when the ab crunch gets basically no range. But with the issues the arms and hips have, you can't really utilize any of it without running the risk of something breaking. And what poses you can get with these limitations are super simple, basically turning the figure into a glorified statue. This whole thing feels like a case of skewed priorities. They focus so much on getting it looking as good as possible in a static default pose that it can't really do anything but that. I know some might find the disaster part of this video's title to be a bit hyperbolic, and yeah, this isn't a complete train wreck, there are positives here, but I would argue that an action figure not even being able to function properly as an action figure while charging in the ballpark of $150 Canadian, around double to triple the price of what an SH Figuarts would have costed at that time, by the way, is kind of a massive failure, you know? If your figure can't do the basic thing it's expected to do at a decent level while also having breaking issues, that's a disaster. Maybe not a catastrophic one, but still. I think what really gets me though is that I can see the potential this line had thanks to their third and final release. Luffy really shows how the team working on these figures learned from their mistakes. They've ditched the silicone plastic for regular joints, reworked the hip design leading to better articulation, all while still having the strengths of nice sculpting and a good amount of accessories. Had this guy been released first, maybe things would be different. Maybe this line would have found its footing and still be going to this day. But that's pure speculation. We have what we have, and sadly, Goku just isn't good enough. Coming in a little under 18.5 centimeters, Goku is certainly a lot bigger than most action figures I've covered. He sits in the 1/9 scale, a scale you usually don't see often. So if you were hoping for whatever reason to use him as a filler piece in a 1/12 or 1/10 display, then sorry, but that's just not gonna work. This might sound weird, but Imagination Works Goku sort of reminds me of MP44 Optimus Prime. Both figures prioritized one aspect over everything else. In Goku's case, it's the looks over the articulation and build, and with MP44, it's the robot mode over the transformation and vehicle mode. And the end result was both coming up worse for it. Though let me be clear, MP44 is nowhere near as bad as this guy. At least with MP44, they fixed the issues of the knees potentially breaking. Given that we aren't exactly starved for options when it comes to Dragon Ball figures, there's no reason to get him beyond maybe custom fodder. Imagination Works tried to aim big, but sadly it seems they're just going to be a footnote in Bandai's figure history. And honestly, that's a shame. But with that all being said, we're at the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, and for getting me to 200 subscribers. I'll see you in the next one. Later.